Call this committee the whole meeting to order for June 23rd at 7 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we have a couple individuals who have called in for public participation. First will be Jonathan Cox. Jonathan, it's all yours. Jonathan, are you there?
I'm sorry, I had my mic on mute. I apologize. Thanks, everybody, for hearing me. I'm calling in regards to the chicken ordinance that we're talking about voting on tonight. And I did a little bit of fact-finding. There are only 14 cities in the entire state of Illinois that actually have a law on the books that prohibit chickens, and Lincoln is one of 14. And of those 14 cities, it's not counting large cities like Chicago, Springfield, so it's Decatur. And I think that we are an agricultural community, so we need to remember that that's our roots. Currently with the pandemic, with the COVID-19, and different things like that, I know that there's an economy issue because for some people on fixed incomes and what have you, chickens provide eggs. It provides them a food source. It's good for kids, the 4-H program, which everybody knows somebody that's been involved in 4-H and all the wonderful things that it's done for our community. 4-H, encourages chickens. As a chef, I like to have control over my food. I like to know what my chickens are being fed. I like to know that they're being raised in a humane environment, that they're not just in a laying factory where they just lay until they die. And for some people, they're pets. And then the last thing I wanted to ask is, I was reading through the article, and I'm not sure where did we get the stipulations for where you could and couldn't have the chickens and things like that. I was wondering if someone could tell me that.
I believe Alderman Keller provided those to the council. Is that correct?
Okay, well, I was just noticing with some of the wordage. For example, it says item 4, it says that you can't have a chicken in a side yard, but there are some homes in Lincoln that don't have a backyard, and they have a side yard. It's a fenced-in side yard, but it's a side yard nonetheless. So that would be something that would have to then require a variance in order to get that. And then the other question that I had is, I'm trying to understand. So if we were to have to get a permit for the chickens, then are we also? And this is just for my own knowledge. If someone has horses in the city limits, should they be getting permits to have horses? If you have to get a permit to have a chicken, but you don't have to have a permit to own a cat or a dog, I mean, you should get your dog license with the county, but not everybody follows those rules, sadly. But and then do you have to? You see what I'm saying? It's if it's rabbits, if it's hamsters. I mean, I'm not being funny. I'm literally being serious about this. So those are the things that I'm just concerned about, and the things that I've read in the ordinance. So I don't know that I agree with the concept of paying a fee. But thank you for your time, gentlemen, and I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Alderman Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Jonathan, of course, we'll discuss this more fully later on in the agenda, but I'll attempt to answer a couple of your questions. So the concern about the side yard, that's something we can certainly consider, and we can mull around. Our concern, one of our concerns, is, of course, is ensuring that we have a setback from property, from a neighbor's property line, and so we wanted to be sure that there's enough room for the chickens, enough room for a coop, but also enough room that it allows the setback with the neighbor. So I suppose we can go back and look at that, but I suppose if a side yard would satisfy that, then that perhaps that's a consideration. The permit, that's the other thing I was going to address. And so, yeah, my thought was, I think a permit is, of course, first of all, necessary, and an application fee is necessary for several reasons. My thought is because it allows a person to take it seriously. And we know that what the person is getting into, if they're willing to pay up front for a permit, they're willing to probably do what it takes to handle the raising of chickens responsibly. Also, there may be some monitoring of this by city staff, and so it's necessary that we compensate for some company time that it might require to go out and inspect said chickens. So, hope that answers
Mr.
those
Keller,
questions.
thank you for that. I just have, so my one question is this then. So as far as, like I said, as far as horses go, so then are we also going to rewrite the ordinance that people that have horses are going to need to get permits too? Because, I mean, 4 horses in the city limits is a lot of horses.
Alderwoman Horn.
Yes, Jonathan, this is Kathy Horn, and I believe when the people that have the horses came to us and asked that they were given a permit for them. We passed an ordinance for that.
I don't remember. Yeah, I really don't remember, but
Yeah, it was.
it could be. I mean,
Treasurer Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Alderman Horn is correct on that, and I would also add to that, I think that the ordinance had very strict parameters so that you have to have enough land to support having a horse, and there are a number of other restrictions in that ordinance, so it isn't like every, small lot is going to be allowed to have horses. There are rather strict guidelines on that, and I don't recall exactly what those are because it's been a number of years ago, but I know that the ordinance is very specific in limiting how you can domicile horses on your property. So it's very strictly regulated.
Mr. Woodhull, did you have something?
Yeah, actually, having the horses is a special use within the R2 district, so that is something that goes immediately through the planning commission. Once it's approved through the planning commission, then it's not a yearly permit or anything of that nature. It's just considered a special use, so they have to go through the planning commission to get that approved throughout anywhere in the city in that R2 district. So no, it's not a permitting situation year by year. And there, yes, Mr. Collins is correct. There's a lot of parameters involved in that.
So I did take a minute to pull that up, and Mr. Woodhull is correct. It goes into things like they should be kept stable or maintained on any zoning lot in the R1 residential district. 1 horse per every 1.5 acres of pasture. No stable or paddock building should be placed within 300 feet of a residence. Shall not be in the front yard of the property nor within 15 feet of any property line. No stable building shall be placed within 50 feet of the principal residence building. And Mr. Cox, I'd be glad to send these to you if you'd like, so that you could review those.
No, I'm not debating. I'm just saying that then should that be in the ordinance, then perhaps that needs to be eliminated from the writing in the one you're proposing, because horses are also listed in that.
Are you,
So that was I don't care that honestly, I don't care as a citizen. I don't care that someone has horses. I'm just saying that what's good for one is good for all, and that's why I was saying if horses is in there, then should that be stricken off, because that's a special use permit, right?
yeah, we can certainly have that discussion as a council when we get to that point. Mr. Cox, did you have anything else?
No, the only thing that I want to voice again is I don't agree with I love that you guys are doing this. I love that you're investigating this. I understand why there needs to be some numbers on the amount of chickens that people have in the city, but the only thing that I do want to say is I do not think that I should have to get a permit to have chickens. I don't think that that's, like I said, unless you're going to require that every single person that has a pet, has a cat, has a dog, has anything is going to get a permit, then I don't think that just because it's a poultry. I mean, I understand, but it seems like that's more of a health department issue than it is a city governance issue. But thank you for your time, gentlemen. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Gabe, did you want to speak when we get to that item on the agenda pertaining to the tract of land?
And Mr. Mayor, I apologize. I'm just on to listen. I don't want to participate.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, moving down to number 4 on the agenda. Lincoln CSO Improvement Design Contract Amendment Number 1 to add the design and bidding phase effort for addition of a bridge to allow access on existing city-owned property to the CSO treatment improvements. Mr. Bateman or Mr. Bounds, did you want to speak on this one?
I can go first, and then Andrew can add to it if I miss anything. What this is an additional $60,000 in engineering fees for the CSO project. The reason for this is in the area where the sewage treatment plant is, for some reason it was split down the middle, and the expansion is going on the side of the property that is opposite of that big ditch that we all know that runs down through that property. So there was several meetings with Mr. Welch, myself, the homeowner association for Lincoln Lakes, trying to work out agreements with using their road, and which would have made it to where we would have constantly had an agreement. We would have had to repair the road if something happened and such. And then there was a offer to buy an adjacent piece of property to get to that piece of land, and those numbers were not realistic for the city to do that. So it came up that we would build a bridge over top of that concrete ditch. This would allow two things. One, we wouldn't ever have to go into an agreement with any other personal property owner or association to get to our own sewer treatment plant, and it would give the sewer treatment plant 24-hour-a-day access to that portion of the CSO project. And I know it sounds expensive, but it is in part with the loan, and it just makes sense to make this a permanent fixture, so we don't ever have to work out any kind of agreement with private individuals again to use our own sewer plant.
I completely agree with Alderman Bateman. His assessment of the situation is spot on. That ditch that goes down in the center basically divides our property in two there, treats our storm flow, so unfortunately it can go nowhere, and we do not have any permanent access to the other side that is truly accessible. So this was the most cost-effective solution to provide that in perpetuity.
Yeah, and I'll add to this because I was in those discussions as well. We explored every possible option that we could prior to this to get access to the property and the locations where they need to get access to. And we ran into one obstacle or another. And that's when the idea of the bridge was proposed by Mr. Bateman, and CMT did the research and the work on that. If you look in here, it is a amended contract amount of $1,110,000, but given the low interest rate that we've received and the principal forgiveness, we're still well within range of the estimate that we had given in the beginning for this upgrade. Alderman Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. So this, of course, is not part of the original plans. This is an increase of $60,000, but it's just also just for the engineering. Do we have an estimate or ballpark of what the actual construction of it will also then cost?
This Christie's on. The bridge itself, we estimated somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000, and it's also going to basically make some additional improvements to help get access above the 100-year flood elevation and allow for, as they said, access in perpetuity.
Alderman Bateman.
So in total, if the bridge comes in at $400,000 plus the $60,000 additional in engineering cost, this is still below what Mr. Welch and I were trying to negotiate with private property owners to get access to that side of the property, and it is still below our original estimate for the total project because we came in so far under budget anyway. And it just makes sense that at that point, we don't have to ever ask permission to get to our own property. This isn't a fancy bridge. It's just a bridge that they can run heavy equipment across and trucks and such, to go from one side of that ditch to the other. So, I mean, when the plant was built.
There will be a need for maintenance coming up because now we're gonna have the burr screen with the dumpster, and so after an event, they're gonna have to get rid of the debris. So there'll be periodic garbage trucks going across there that didn't used to have to do that, so there'll be more access required for the new system.
Again, these are reasons why building the bridge makes sense, because we would have had to ask permission from the Lincoln Lakes Association to use that roadway for heavy equipment and heavy trucks, either during construction, and then afterwards it would have been an ongoing agreement with them to use heavy trucks for cleaning and disposal of the waste. So this makes sense to where we don't have to wait for any signed agreements to facilitate any maintenance at our facility.
Please.
Alderman Downs?
So the bridge option, that's roughly $500,000. If we didn't and used the Lincoln Lakes Road, how much would that cost per repair? Like, do we have an estimate of what the other option would be?
Well, the problem with the Lincoln Lakes Road is that, quite honestly, the condo association back there, that's their only entrance in and out of that whole condo association. And they really don't want to be inconvenienced. Even if we offered to come back and do routine maintenance on the road throughout the project. We offered to lay a brand new road back there as an option. And at the end of the conversations, we just couldn't agree to use that road. And so all the conversations that followed went in other directions away from that road. So.
Okay.
Okay. So you guys want to place this on the regular agenda?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Place that on the regular agenda. Okay, next item is the Union Pacific Railroad Material and Force Account Estimate portion of Fifth Street Road that's being constructed in an amount of $219,145. Administrator Kavelman, would you like to speak to this one? You're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, all right. Yes, we were working back in November of 2019. We're working with Union Pacific Railroad to look at a process of doing their railroad crossing at the same time as we would be doing the construction starting down there at the former French property along there. And they have to do it for safety reasons. The ICC came along with it. This was an issue that was brought up before back in March, and the council decided not to do anything with it. So the gentleman thought that we were leaving it and we were not going to do the project. So after talking with several people and talking with him, he did respond back in several different emails. But I did pass that on to all the aldermen and the council members and our team. They can see what's going on. But we have to have this. It's just an estimate. It is quite a bit of money. If we would have done this back, I think in 2017, I think it would have been $115,000 less, but we didn't do it, and we just kind of pushed it on. And so now we have to get this finished. It's just allowing them to go forward with the work. So I'd like to have it on the agenda if anyone would do that, please, for next week.
Any discussion on it?
I'd say yes, place it on the agenda.
Okay, we'll place that on the regular agenda.
Was that Mr. Hine?
Yes, place on the agenda, I said.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is the ordinance amending the City of Lincoln's animal control provisions to allow poultry. Alderman Keller, would you like to speak
Yeah,
to this?
sure. Thank you, Mayor. So, of course, we know this has come forward before the council several times, and So I've been working with Wes Woodhall as well as Attorney John Hoblet to craft an ordinance, and Alderman Colby Leith came on board as well, so I appreciate your help. And so what you have before you is a proposed ordinance which addresses the keeping of hens as well as the provisions 6-2-33 under poultry, keeping of chickens, and some of the restrictions that we would impose for anyone who wanted to do so. Of course, this came up earlier as well with a permitting. I still propose we keep a permit. As I said, I think that it increases the seriousness of someone who wants to raise chickens if they're willing to go through a permit and pay it, as well as I think it allows us to keep a record of who has chickens and who doesn't in our community, and I think that's a necessary step in this whole process. So a couple of things I want to say to this, but I'll open it up if anybody has any questions to this.
Alderman Bateman.
So as I stated before, I'm still going to be a no vote. I've dealt with this issue for many years while at the county board level, Logan County Animal Control Chairman. I had an email forwarded to every alderman from the Logan County Health Department. Obviously, if you read it, they're asking us to strongly sway in the direction of not having chickens. Chickens are known disease carriers. There's that issue, plus the rodent issue. We all know that we're still getting phone calls about coyotes, and this town has a epidemically severe feral cat issue, and feral cats and coyotes would like nothing more than to dine on a few chickens. There is also another reason I would urge people to vote no is in the last conversation we had about chickens, as Mr. Keller stated, a permit would have people take it seriously. For every person that takes it seriously, there'll be at least 10 people that don't. It took less than 24 hours from our last conversation of having chickens to where chickens showed up at a residence in this town because they heard us talking about chickens, and what better way to have chickens than have free-range chickens, which then caused animal control to get a phone call, the Lincoln Police Department to get a phone call, and try to figure out what to do, whose chickens they were, and how to dispose of them. The other issue I would like for you to consider is we just passed an animal control ordinance, which has now been sent off to the Logan County Board for consideration of changes, giving the animal control warden more authority to this ordinance. But it sounds like in my discussions with the Logan County Animal Control that chickens would not be on their list. Those conversations happened even yet tonight, that they would have no way of transporting chickens, catching chickens, or a way to house chickens when they are captured. They are disease carriers, and we can't take the chance of taking chickens back to the animal control building, which then in turn would spread those diseases to dogs and cats in that building. So at that point, it sounds like before we pass this ordinance, we would have to determine who's going to monitor these coops and chickens, which would leave that up to Mr. Woodhall and the Lincoln Police Department. And you would probably want to get their take on it. My take is this. Mr. Keller and I have a house in our ward that has over 100 cats in it, and it's taking months to go to court to get this cleaned up. We all have residents in our neighborhoods that have grass a foot tall, garbage sitting everywhere, windows broken. The list goes on and on. Wes and his 3 total, do a wonderful job, but they are severely understaffed to fight the ordinance violations that we have going on in this city now. And then by the time it goes from Wes to letters to fines and then on to John at the court system, it's months if not years before things are resolved. This is just another issue that's going to exacerbate that problem, and I don't think saving 99 cents on a dozen eggs is worth all the hassle that it's going to happen. I like fresh eggs myself, and after the last meeting, I got more than a dozen phone calls of, why don't people just go to the farmer's market and support the local farmers we already have who bring fresh eggs to that market on a weekly basis out there at the fairgrounds? I just think the problems are going to far outweigh the benefits for having chickens.
Alderman Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate Alderman Bateman, you bringing up these concerns. And so for that reason, I decided to reach out to some of the cities in Central Illinois that have ordinances allowing chickens, just to see what concerns they have and what issues we would be facing. I had a conversation with the city manager of Decatur, John Kenseth, with Rob Savo of Highland Park, with Skip Bradshaw of Jacksonville. And all three of them said that they have had absolutely no problems since they have passed their ordinances. The only problem Decatur had was that they first allowed chickens in the front yard, which I'm not sure why they even did that, but they have had no issues whatsoever. I asked about all of these things, noise, loud hens. They say, well, no, there's more dogs than chickens. You'll never hear them. And he said, who was it? Skip Bradshaw. Actually, they own chickens themselves, and they said their neighbors have never complained. As far as health issues, I don't think they're any worse carriers of any disease than any other animals. We can limit the number of permits, which is why a permitting process I think is important, because we can limit the number of permits we want to give. But again, they have much worse issues with dogs and cats than they do any others. There's never been a problem with smell in any of these places. So I left with all these conversations thinking, in fact, Skip Bradshaw said, I don't even know why it's a question. Do it. So anyway, I did not have any negative feedback from any of these people. I asked, what complaints, what are we going to be facing? Yes, Westwood Hall would probably be the one who would monitor it, and he and I talked about it, and he freely admitted he's not a chicken guy. I think that was his words. But again, I did ask these gentlemen, is this problematic? Is there a lot of oversight? And they said no. So I'm convinced that it's a lot of fear that doesn't materialize.
Alderman Parrott.
Yeah. How is the owners of the chickens getting rid of the waste, the straw, the material that they? I have friends, relatives that have chickens, and they live out in the country for the most part, and they can dispose of it a little more easily. I think in town you're going to be getting rid of it in the city trash pickup.
Alderman Keller.
Yeah. Yeah, and I asked that same question because it to me like, we really want chickens in our garbage. But I asked them. They said, yeah, it's no different than the other waste. It's recommended that you put it in a couple bags, but put it in your garbage. And they've said that as far as waste disposal, they never had an issue with that.
Alderman Hoineke.
Yes, I'd like to see at least to go towards a vote. I think the community is, we've had gentlemen up here a couple of times now talking about it. I haven't seen any, news headlines of other municipalities having huge outbreaks of diseases because of chickens that they have in their yards. If for some reason the city of Lincoln becomes totally chaos because of chickens, we can always revoke the ordinance and not allow chickens any longer, So I think we should at least put on the agenda and have a vote on it.
Mr. Woodhull, can you share what you shared with us in our afternoon meeting today about this?
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't recall exactly what I said. I spoke with someone in Jacksonville as well. It wasn't the same person Mr. Keller mentioned, but they did say the exact same thing, that I think the lady I spoke with, I think she had one issue to over the course of 3 or 4 years, and I believe that was a rooster. So they did have minimal complaints or any issues that I found out in the municipalities that do have this ordinance passed. Other than that, like Mr. Bateman said, you know, one day after this discussion was had, not a vote or not an allowance of it, but the discussion, there was a chicken free and running down the street. So within one day that became an issue, and you know, or I know anyways, that it will be an issue. As far as policing it goes, I will absolutely do what is asked of me. I don't think with the other animals in town, the coons, the possums, everything else, we get those calls and we've never told anybody no. So we'll just, if it does pass and come to fruition, it's just something we'll have to deal with, and we're willing to do so if the council sees fit to pass it.
Thanks, Wes.
And I'm sorry, I forgot if I said anything else earlier that I don't recall, but you could remind me.
Nope, that sums it up. Thank you.
Okay.
Alderman Bateman.
So my main problem is, you know, and I like fresh eggs just like everybody else. My main problem is I've been dealing with feral cats and rodents for literally over a decade. And this is just going to help increase that problem. And we have a severe problem in this town. And if we had the staff to where we can control it, we can't get people to put their dogs on a leash, or the dogs are running around, and we're adding to it again. Bloomington has an ordinance. I called the city of Bloomington. It's a pretty good sized city, and they don't have a huge number of people that have chickens, just because, you know, it ends up being a bigger hassle. One of the stipulations I like in their ordinance is any coop has to be 10 feet off your neighbor's property line because of feathers and waste and such like that. You know, we have, Mr. Keller and I have a constituent in our district that the neighbor scoops his dog's waste like he's supposed to, and he piles it right against the fence next to her property, and it becomes an issue. So to me, it's more the irresponsible owners and the fact that we don't have the staffing to control some of our more egregious code violators now, and then we're just going to add more work to it.
Mr. Hoblet.
If I may add, given the fact that we indicated that I believe Mr. Woodhull's office would be the enforcing agency in regards to this, and this is falling within the animal control aspect, we probably should add something within this particular chapter that it would be the Wes's office that would be the enforcement as opposed to animal control, because the animal control has the authority to enforce for the entirety of this chapter. So having said that, we can add that, and just to go outside of the legal bounds necessary, I grew up on a farm myself that had chickens, and one of the areas where there's concerns that chickens might get out is if there's an open air coop and people are somewhat negligent in regards to the pruning of their chickens' feathers, and so that they grow out and then they're able to jump real high and get out of the coop. It could be that you just have to put provisions in to have a ceiling to your coop, so that limits that particular problem. And just to add, as I grew up on a farm, we had many animals. Coyotes never got into our chickens, but they got into the rabbits. Couldn't keep them for more than 2 weeks. So, just
Alderman
a little
Keller.
information.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. To tag on to what Mr. Hoblet said, he had mentioned about the clipping of the wings, and one thing he'd also mentioned, which I forgot, and probably we should also add in, is a provision prohibiting the butchering of chickens on the property as well, and that's something we'll probably should. So we'll work on adding that. Again, I go back to Alderman Bateman. Again, I think you're right. There will be violators, but there always are. I don't care what we do, there's always going to be violators. But again, this is why I think a permit holds us and holds them. and holds their feet to the fire a little bit more. Again, I asked the question about rodents. Every community has the same animals we have, and I asked, has there been an increase in the number of rodents and wild animals? And they said no, not one instance more of anything that they've ever noticed. You know, and they mentioned about the chicken getting loose. I actually did have a constituent who did call me up and ask me, so are we going to allow people to walk chickens? Because I saw a woman walking a chicken. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not part of it. So just want to throw that in.
Mr. Hoblet and then Mr. Harnicky.
To clarify what Mr. Keller was saying, there are two different types of chickens that you can have. There are egg-laying chickens, and there are essentially meat chickens. They are sent in the mail, which is a little surreal to get little chicks delivered to you from the mail in the post office. I guarantee you, from experience, the post office does not like to keep those for anything longer than a few hours. But there's different types. I do recommend a stipulation that states that there should not be any butchering, and try to keep wraps on that, because that would be, I don't think that's in the spirit of municipality to have that type of activity occur.
Mr. Harnicky.
So I guess the question is, do we have these updates for next week, or do we bring this to another cow, or
I don't anticipate those updates being any difficult to add, any difficulty to add. So I can have that ready for for the upcoming voting if you so want to.
Mr. Bateman.
So what kind of setbacks are we talking?
That is in the provisions. Let me see if I can find that here.
Because you was talking about having a ordinance variation for side yards.
I think the side yards would just be a
10-foot.
case by case. A side yard for a corner lot, and you have a side street next to you, you're not right up against another house. So I mean, I think a side lot is going to side yard is going to have to be a case by case basis, I think.
Alderman Parrott.
I think for not having a side is for just the beauty of the town necessarily. You know, I mean, you could be across the street and you don't want to look across, and have a chicken coop perhaps, out your front window or whatever. So I'm kind of like not having it in a side yard, backyards. I kind of like, and I think that a lot of this, if there's probably a lot of thought that they're going to save some money by, not just by having fresh eggs, it's going to cost them more to raise these chickens than they're going to get from the eggs that they're going to have. I mean, they're going to have quite a few eggs with 6 chickens if they do it. So with keeping the hay or the straw inside the building and the chicken feed, and if we have this pandemic and they think that there's going to be a lot of chicken feed out there necessarily, with everybody having chickens, and I don't think they're gonna get a lot back out of this other than they're gonna have fresh eggs. And like Alderman Bateman said, you can just go to the farmer's market and get those. Now I'm pretty much for allowing it, because I don't like a lot of regulations in this type of issue, as far as not allowing individuals to have chickens for egg laying purposes. So I'll probably be voting yes on this. I just want to make sure that everything in the ordinance is what we want it to be, and make sure that it's not going to be a distraction or a health issue for their neighbors.
Sam, did you have something?
The setbacks, again, you said that was 10 feet off the neighbor's property.
Yep. Yes. Coops and free ranges shall be 10 feet from the property lines. Coops and free ranges shall be set back no less than 12 feet from the property lot dwelling unit and no less than 30 feet from any neighboring dwelling units. I'm reading that right.
Are we going to add tops, as our city attorney suggested, so that they don't get out? So it should be a totally enclosed.
Yes, that's also in there as well. Yeah.
It says chickens shall be secured in their coops from predators from sundown to sunup. So it has to be a secured coop.
Yeah, but a top on it so they can't jump out.
If we have to elaborate on what secured means, we can do that.
I would, because coons would crawl right into it.
Thank you. I was just gonna add, I mean, I can't speak for the potential people that are gonna be filing for these permits or whatever, but I assume that a lot of them are gonna be hobbyist and maybe educational for their children and stuff like that nature. I don't think they're really into it to have a dozen eggs every morning for breakfast or something, you know? So I think it's a good thing.
Alderman Bateman?
You'll also, if you're gonna permit it, there needs to be fines involved too. That hasn't been discussed on the people who are just gonna free range their chickens, or chickens getting loose, or irresponsible chicken owners. So, I mean, as long as John comes forward with a workable document, I think all aspects needs to be that, and we haven't heard from the county yet. So, you know, I'm kind of in favor of tabling it one more cow, and maybe we'll hear from the county at that point on what their decision is, unless we're just gonna go straight up. Wes Woodhull catches the chicken, and then he has to determine how to dispose of it once he catches the chicken.
Alderman Parrott and then Mr. Hoblet.
On number 4, it says coops and free range areas. Ron, can you explain free range areas? I mean, I have a pretty good idea, but for everybody else listening.
Yeah, again, that's like for the run area. I think that's talks about it in here somewhere in a different one about the run area. So that's basically a free range. It's still enclosed, but it's an area that is not the pen that they're staying in at the night. So
it's not just letting them out of their coop just to let them.
Right. It's still an enclosure of sorts, but it's not the actual house for them. So
okay.
Mr. Hoblet.
If the council's desire is to add a fine or a penalty for chickens that are essentially caught at large, if that's the term we want to use. I mean, we have a dog at large provision with fines and fees. We can insert those fines for people who are in violation of this. As to what Mr. Woodhull would do with the chicken once he has it, I suppose he could return it to the respective owner once, or if there's an impound fee, so to speak, if you want, because like with a dog. There are a variation of ways that this could be handled, but yes, there's like say for example, there's an impound fee. You know, for a dog, you can have the same type of concept that would exist for a chicken if you so desire.
Mr. Keller, how do these chickens get actually tagged? Like my dog, I have a microchip in my dog. Surely people aren't microchipping chickens. Do they tag their leg? And the reason I ask is because if they get loose, I think it's going to be a very challenging task to identify who the owner is. And in that case, my personal opinion, and I've talked with Alderman Bateman about this as well, my personal opinion is that if the owner can't be identified, that we identify a farm in the rural community that would be willing to take them, and Wes just take them out there and dump them. And I don't mean that to be harsh, to say that people could lose their chickens, but I'm just saying they're a little bit of a different animal to deal with, and we're going to have to do something with them.
Well, it's a good question. I never actually considered that before, so we can definitely look into that. I suppose that's a whole new twist on why did the chicken cross the road? I guess to go to the animal farm. So okay, it's a good point. We'll look into that.
Alderman Parrott.
Honestly, the conversation we had was, if the fine is $100, who's gonna that's not my chicken. I'm not paying $100 fine. It's not mine. See you later. Like John said, you got it for $25 in the mail. They're not gonna pay $100 fine. They're just gonna let that chicken go and go get another chicken. So, you know, we can discuss this forever, but these things need to be hammered out before it ends up being like the trash ordinance, where we're coming back constantly trying to work out the details. Maybe we need to find out from other cities, what do they do? Because, you know, animal control right now, that's not my dog. Even though 5 neighbors can verify it's your dog, you know, that's not my dog. I'm not paying $150.
So what happens to the dog in that case?
It goes to animal control and then gets adopted out, and the people go get another dog. It happens every day, 10 times a day.
Well, you should have a collar with your their address and stuff on it. I mean, vets will take those dogs in and they'll scan them for a microchip. So like my dogs are microchipped, but they're never out of the house, so except for the bathroom. Alderman Parrott.
I was going to say, I mean, you can always band a bird's leg, you know, with identification.
So is that a requirement then?
I mean,
It goes in the ordinance?
Yes.
I guess we could do that, yeah. I don't know how it's going to work, and you know, as far as how do you tag it, you know, as for identification purposes, unless you, when you give a license, you get so many bands, and then Wes would have to make sure that the chickens were all banned, you know, when they gave them out.
That's a very good point. And, you know, quite honestly, we did hear from Mr. Cox earlier about the permits. I'm not so bent on like a permit fee per se, but the permit itself actually gives the city some awareness of where these chickens may be so that we can easily, resolve issues when they happen, help identify owners, things of that nature. It's not really meant to be a burden of any sort. It's, in my opinion, it's just meant to make life easier for them and the city who may have to deal with them if they get loose. Alderman Downs.
Okay, so a little bit ago, Jeff said that we speculate the bulk of the chicken owners would be hobbyists and pets and things like that. Pets cost money. Pets are expensive. You know, I mean, I don't see any issue with charging a fee for a pet. It's just part of owning a pet. If any pet gets out and you have to pay $100 to get it back, like that's part of the game, man. That's just disgusting. I can't believe that people would just abandon their animal, abandon their pet because they don't want to pay $100. I could never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that happened. I can't even believe that. Sorry for speaking out of turn earlier as well. It just kind of shocked me. Secondly, we talked earlier about if we do have an unidentified chicken that that Wes would have to catch it and then take it out to some farm somewhere, someplace and dump it. I'm not in favor of that. Like that sounds super cruel. I don't want to do that. I think that these issues need to be worked out ahead of time, and I think we should bring it to the next cow. I hate to keep kicking it down the road, but we have issues that need to be worked out still.
Yeah, maybe I need to elaborate. I didn't mean what I said earlier to just be a dump and run on a chicken. You drive out in the country and just throw it somewhere and go.
Well, I mean,
what I meant was, and quite honestly, this can sound really silly, but ask the chicken if his life is better being in a coop in someone's backyard or out on a farm running in a field. I bet he'd rather run in the field. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but if he's used to living in a yard all his life, how's he going to adjust to... I don't know how chickens work.
I'm not meant to say that we should take the chickens from people. I'm just saying if we reach a situation where we have a chicken and we can't identify an owner, we've got to do something with them. They have got to go somewhere.
They do.
And a farm in a rural community seems like a logical choice.
It just seems like it's still just an unresolved issue, and we need to have everything in place prior to voting on it. Just for the benefit of the chickens.
Okay. Ms. Bateman?
My question is if Walt or Wes gets the chicken, no matter what time of day it is, evening, daytime, how long is he holding on to that chicken, and how's he going to hold on to that chicken until he finds the person it belongs to? I mean, is it fair to a city employee to stand around and hold on to a chicken all day long? We don't have any place to put that chicken to find the owner.
And you're also talking animal control is on call 24 hours a day. The Lincoln Police Department's on call 24 hours a day. I'm pretty sure you're not going to get Wes Woodhull to raise his hand and say, I'll be on call 24 hours a day to go catch a loose chicken. And the other part is, and you can ask Paul because his officers responded to said loose chicken. I don't know if you guys remember watching Rocky. Catching a chicken isn't that easy.
Alderman Downs.
So I know that Alderman Keller brought up the no butchering chickens in the city limits, which I'm in favor of that. However, are we just banning meat chickens altogether? Because what if I raised a bunch of meat chickens and then just transported them to the meat locker in Atlanta to have them killed? I mean, do we have any stipulation on transporting a bunch of chickens?
I don't think so because The one that Alderman Bateman's talking about got transported into the city and nobody knew anything about it. You put a chicken in your car and take it anywhere you want.
There'll be chickens in this town tomorrow. You can mark my words.
Alderman Parrott.
I just think the ordinance is talking about egg-laying chickens.
Okay, so no meat chickens then? Okay.
So, and here's my opinion on some of this stuff. I'll just say up front that I'm in favor of this because, and I've said it up here probably 50 times, we find a lot of reasons why we can't do things for people instead of trying to work harder to figure out how to make it happen for people. And we're here to serve the people. There's people in this town that got many interests in different hobbies, as Jeff had mentioned. You know, I get it. A carton of eggs is 99 cents at the store. But you know what? A cucumber is $1 as well. But my brother grows a garden every year and grows his own cucumbers. People are willing to go through that because they want fresh produce. They want to go through the process of growing it. It gives them things to do. It's a hobby. So I don't want to strip that right from somebody. And if we do this in a very, very responsible manner and we put rules in place and guidelines for how to address the things that we know may happen, then I say we give it a shot and see what happens rather than kill it. Treasurer Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. I think having a permit fee would be a good idea, and I don't mean you have to have one permit per chicken, but for the purpose of having chickens, you know, it would be a good way to keep people from doing it who might not really be taking it seriously and might not take good care of it. So I think having a permit fee, and I don't mean an exorbitant amount of money, but I think a reasonable fee for the privilege of doing that or for the purpose of doing that. And the other thing, I'm just curious about this in the proposed ordinance. It says the coops free range areas shall be set back no less than 12 feet from the primary lot dwelling unit. Why do we care how close it is to their house? I mean, assuming it's their house.
I would assume it's for health and sanitation reasons. But we'd have to ask whoever provided this example. Alderman Keller would have to go back and ask.
Some people, that'll be difficult if they don't have a real large lot. That would be hard to meet that and keep it back far enough from the property line.
Yeah, Treasurer Conzo, good question, and I think that you're right that it is for health and safety reasons. Wes might be able to speak to this more. To be honest, a lot of these stipulations came from other ordinances in other cities that we've copied that we think are a good idea. So I don't know if this is necessarily a method to the madness. Wes, if you want to address that one, go ahead.
There's no, at least from my poultry knowledge, there's nothing specific at the 12-foot that I came up with. However, all the sample ordinances I looked through and found all had something of that nature. It's similar, I guess, to your accessory structure, staying away from your primary dwellings. In this case, there's probably certainly more of a sanitation issue, but other ones, it's collapses, fires, that sort of thing, trying to keep them from spreading. A lot of times, say a windstorm, your shed is way more likely to get pushed over than your primary dwelling. So that's typically what the separation purposes are for. In this case, I certainly would think the sanitation would definitely come into play, as well as from the neighboring properties. Smells, noises, sanitation again. So that's where those came into. And like I said before, all of this was pretty much 100% guesswork on my end. So it doesn't hurt my feelings to change it all around. So this was just something like a working, just a draft, I suppose.
Alderman Keller and then Alderman Bateman.
Actually, I'll let Kevin go first if you don't mind.
Well, it seems like I'm still going to be the only no vote, but I have a kind of sarcastic comment to make. I sent out an email about health concerns from the Logan County Health Department and was kind of pushed back as there's no health concerns, but then again, the setback from your primary residence is because of health concerns. So is there health concerns with the chicken, or is there no health concerns with the chicken? It can't be both. You know, that if the setback was due to health reasons that for the people that actually live in the house, then how can we sit here and say there's no health concerns, we should have it next to the other guy's house?
Alderman Downs.
I agree with Kevin. I reached out. I did some research on my own before this as well. I reached out to the vet, and he agreed that the risk outweighed the reward. The risk of disease, salmonella and avian flu. Those were the two I remember, but there was some others. It's just too much for a dozen eggs, I felt.
Is it, and this is, I'm asking for my own knowledge, your concern about sanitation and safety, are you worried about the people that have the chickens, or are you worried about the people that are their neighbors?
Both, for me.
But if there's a setback inside of their property at a 30-foot distance, they would have to be extremely negligent to never clean up the coop, have chicken poop laying all over the place, be the most filthiest conditions possible for that to spread, wouldn't it? Or does it spread when a rain happens and then it washes into other properties? I don't know. I'm asking just for knowledge sake, because you guys appear to be very knowledgeable on the sanitation part. So just wanted to ask.
From what I understood, there was variances from disease, whatever disease you were talking about. Salmonella would only really affect the person who's eating the eggs, and it's not spread from one person to another. The avian flu you could catch your flu from the chickens, I believe, from how I understood, and then I could give it to the rest of you.
In the county email I sent to everybody, it stated several diseases, and I talked to an individual this week whose family bought a farm, and they moved horses into the barn, and the horses died, and the vet determined that the horses died because the barn was previously used to house chickens, and the disease was there, and that's how the horses got it and died. So yes, my concern is more for the neighbors. If the person decides to have chickens, that's their choice. But what about the people on either side or the back of them? Again, I just want to point out, we kind of shot down my idea that they carry diseases, but then of course the setback from their primary residence was because of diseases.
I'm not shooting down your idea that they don't carry diseases. I think any animal can carry diseases. Dogs carry diseases, and we let them in our house and sleep in our beds.
Chickens are more prevalent.
Understand. Alderman Keller.
Yeah, and I certainly don't mean this to be flippant, but yeah, there are risks to getting up in the morning. I think there's fear, and then when you face, I think that there's unwarranted fears, and then when you realize and you face those situations, you realize how unwarranted those fears really were. And again, for these reasons, this is why I reached out to these cities that have them. And again, you can call these people if you're a doubter, but they've all said there's been no problems. And if there were, unless there's something around Lincoln that would cause the chickens to be more dangerous here than any other city, I think that this is all overblown. But there were some concerns and some considerations that were brought up, so I'm willing to take this back. We can put this on the next cow instead of voting on it next week, and then we'll come back in 2 weeks with some of the things that we brought up and see if we can make this a little tighter.
How's everybody else feel? Yeah, go ahead, Wes.
Sorry, I think I didn't mean to misspeak if I did earlier. When I was first doing that, I really, again, don't have the knowledge as far as the diseases and whatnot go with poultry. So when I meant sanitation, I guess I meant more of if I had an outside specific dog pen for my dog, I would have it away from the house because regardless how long they're in there, how often it's clean, they are going to go to the bathroom in there. So I guess I maybe I misspoke, but rather than diseases and stuff, the sanitation, I was thinking more of keeping the wafting, odor, say, from my back door, with, including the other stuff I mentioned, just accessory structure type stuff. I guess when I meant sanitation, I thought more of just, not right on my back patio, but off the back patio sort of concept.
Okay, so we'll bring this back on the 14th of July.
Sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Moving on to the next item, the opening of bids for real estate listed in the Lincoln Courier, tract of land along the city landfill. City Clerk Bateman.
We only received one bid from Illinois American Water. As purchase price, 30,000 plus consideration for improvements to the shared access road to the 3.343 acre property to be undertaken during the construction of the proposed water treatment facility, which will benefit land currently owned to the retained by the city of Lincoln, plus city logo signage to be paid for by purchaser on purchaser-owned water tower located at 315 Heitman Drive, Lincoln, Illinois, with current bid value of $25,880. As everything else, it would have to be, this whole bid would have to be gone through to make sure it met all the requirements of the bid. So
the bid amount was 25,000.
And it says 30,000 plus consideration for improvements, and then with current bid value of $25,880.
Mr. Hoblet.
I believe when this went out to bid, there was a list of requested improvements / work that was been done to the property, and I think that's probably the consideration that's being referenced there.
Alderman Bateman.
I'm not going to try to dwell on this very long, but I think it's the appropriate time to bring it up. In discussion of item 4 tonight, we discussed the importance of being able to get to our own property and not having to ask for access. In one of the very first conversations about this water facility, I brought up the fact that I think it's very important, and I still do, for these reasons, that there be a fence between the landfill or the waste facility, I don't even know what it's called, I call it the landfill, and the property, and that Illinois American Water build that fence, build their own gate to get access to the back of that property where they're going to build this water facility. And the reason that I'm pushing so hard for this is we can't ever control who the council is, who the mayor is, who our street and alley superintendent is, and what we really can't control is who owns the water company, who has access to the water company. Another big company may come in and buy the water company. And I know at one time Walt said it would be okay, we would just have a shared gate and that kind of things. As Tracy can tell you, we're already having issues with the gate at the sewer treatment plant for other reasons. And I just think it's imperative that if we allow them to buy this property, that the provisions, as Mrs. Bateman suggested, one of those provisions be they have to build their own access road and fence off our property from their property so that they can only go in and out of their property, and we not have shared access, especially when we can't control who works there, when, time of day, and things like that. I think it just removes the liability factor from the city of Lincoln by asking them to do that. And if I remember right, the gentleman from the water plant facility said absolutely no problem. They had no problem building their own fence, building their own gate, and even suggested that they build us a new gate. They would move our gate down further so that we would have access to our property. I'm just saying that's one of the stipulations I would put on it before I would move forward with this project, is to eliminate the shared space.
Chief Donofsky, did you have something?
Yes, during the meeting that we had with water company, two things were brought up. There will be an access gate to the water plant through a key controlled gate. If you, for the property that they're getting, if you put a fence up, you're going to hamper the access for fire trucks to get back in and turn around in that facility, and it's not acceptable. The whole project hinges on not having that fence up that separates the properties. You're talking about a multi-million-dollar project where one person wants a fence up, and there was 12 people in that room that agreed that the fence would not work.
Walt? Walt, did you have something?
Yes, the property that they're purchasing is at the back of the facility. It's not actually the road. The city would maintain ownership of the roadway. They would just be responsible for maintenance. But the property that's in question is clear at the back of that area behind A&A Towing.
So,
it does not include the roadway.
So Walt, if I understand correctly from our conversation, there would be a gate at the front off of Broadwell Drive that would be jointly shared. They would access that, and then they would access a gate at the back of the landfill property that only they would have an access key to. Is that correct?
That is correct. Their facility would be secured with a gate of their own. But the front gate off of Broadwell Drive entering the facility would be a shared entrance.
Alderman Bateman.
That's what I'm getting at. What's going to stop a individual that works at the water plant to say, hey, I got access to the gate, let's go drop some brush off, nobody will ever know. Mr. Welch and I know of several occasions that has happened at the sewer treatment plant. And that's what I'm getting at. We are allowing a private entity that we have absolutely no control over access to our property. And that's what I have a problem with.
Are you concerned with them being on the property, or are you concerned with them leaving the gate open, similar to what we've seen out at the sewer plant?
All of the above. Hunting. There's many concerns that you and I have had about this, and it's just, it puts too much liability on the city of Lincoln to allow a private company that we have no control over access to our property. I mean, if that's the case, why do we have a gate now at that facility? Because, we want to control who goes in and out. If we make a joint effort, we have lost that control, because we can't control who at the water company gave permission to whoever to get in that gate. I understand Bob's concern, but my concern is allowing a private entity that we have no control over access to our land.
So a couple thoughts on the matter. The fire chief's concerns are legitimate, and I think they need to be considered. The bid did allow for some of those additional costs for that type of stuff. So could we ask them to put an automated gate on the front so that it would close behind them? And therefore the risk of leaving it open is minimized. And then enter into a land use agreement that then helps cover the liability if they are on the property and something happens while going to their property.
I think if that's the direction you're going, it needs to be one step further to where that gate is controlled by a specific set of codes, so we know who enters at what time and when, So at least we can point fingers to whoever when we come to work the next day and we got problems. And again, we're allowing this for a private company that we have no control over their employees.
Walt, did you or Bob have something else?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All that was discussed during the meeting. They can put on the gate with the key cards, so when a key card gets swiped, they know who's been entering and exiting the facility. Both key cards, whether it's a city key card or a water company key card. Also, the gate would automatically close after business hours, like if the dump is open, it would remain open so people can pass. But there could be a timer on it that the gate would close automatically after somebody would pass through after business hours. So that stuff has been discussed with the aldermen, all the department heads that were at those meetings. All those questions were being asked and answered at that meeting.
Walt, did you have something?
No, I've said what I think it's appropriate that we just have one entry gate for both them and us, and they have their own secure entry at the back of going into their facility at the back of the property.
I agree.
Okay. Alderman Hoineke.
I'm just gonna ask city clerk if it passes all the stipulations we had out there, then to go ahead and place it on the agenda. If there's some kind of red flag or something that John sees later, we could always table it at our next voting meeting.
And then those additional enhancements we can talk about afterwards, correct?
Yes.
'Cause they're not stipulated in that
Right.
bid or that contract. Walt, go ahead.
Yeah, they're pretty vague, so that's all negotiable right now. The different upgrades that were put in there.
Okay.
Were vague for a certain reason, and that's all up for negotiation, what should be done and shouldn't be done.
So do we want to put this on the regular agenda to accept the bid?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll place that on the regular agenda then. Thank you. Next topic is discussion regarding fiscal year 2021 appropriations. Treasurer Conzo.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I've distributed to all of you a copy. This is a draft copy of the revenue projections. A committee that's working on that, which consists of City Administrator Kavelman, Alderman Horn, and Alderman Hoineke, and me. We will be meeting tomorrow to start on this and to start working on this. And we've gotten some feedback from you so far, Chief Adams, and I think the others are still working on it. If you can get that to us by tomorrow or come in for that meeting, that'd be great if that's possible. The revenue projections and what I've circulated there is, as I've said, it's a worst case scenario. And this is revised from what we estimated at the beginning of the year. You may recall at that time we were very early in this COVID-19 business. And since then, we have tried to refine some of these revenue projections. And what I've done there is taken what I think is absolutely worst case scenario, which would be about a $1.3 million decrease in our revenue for the year. And I'm still working on that. It may be different tomorrow. I'm still trying to refine that. But and it may be that if there's a quick recovery, that we won't see any loss in revenue, that we'll finish by the end of the year. We'll be back to where we expected to be. The fact is, we'll probably end up somewhere in between. So what I've tried to do is make you aware of that's a possibility, given the forecasts, and they're just that at this point. In some cases from the Illinois Municipal League and from others as well, but possible effects that this would have on the municipal sales tax and state use tax, the state income tax, personal property replacement tax, and the VGT, or video gaming tax. With all that in mind, you may recall the last monthly report that I circulated to you. We had a balance if you combine the general fund checking and then the investment portion of that, which is invested with IMET, together that's $2,429,000, almost $2,430,000. So you've got that much of a cushion in there. Our budget now, not the appropriation, the budget for the general fund is $7,695,878. And our revenues at that initially at the beginning of the year, I think $7,697,000. If we take the kind of hit that I've outlined there, it'd be a decline in our revenues. Obviously, we would have to make that up out of those fund balances, which we could do because that's about half of what those fund balances are. I am hoping that that is not the case. We've tried over many years to build up those fund balances, and I'm hoping that's not the case. The only thing we can do about it is I've said this previously, and I think you're probably all tired of me hearing this, is do not buy anything or spend anything that we don't have to spend until we know for sure. And each month that goes by, we'll have a clearer picture of how much of an effect this is going to have. But with that in mind, we still have to go forward with the appropriation. There again, keep in mind the appropriation is, the budget is, what you plan to spend. Incidentally, last year we did real well. We spent about 400 and some thousand less than what was budgeted. That's, of course, subject to audit. Budget is what you plan to spend. The appropriation is what you can spend if you have to spend it and if there's money available. I know some of you don't like that system. That's the system we use in municipal government. And that's really all I have to say.
You can say my name.
Anything for the treasurer on that one? Okay, thank you, Mr. Conzo. Okay, moving down to announcements. Does anybody have an announcement? Mr. Bateman?
I have two. The first one is, with the extreme success of the opening the downtown streets, which I'm just going to say it again, I have had nothing but good things. I only know of one person who thought it was a disaster, which I don't see how, because the Rio Grande was packed when we drove by tonight, as packed as they could be on the sidewalk. And all the restaurants are liking it, and people are thinking this is something we should do more often, try to figure out a way to have outdoor seating for these places. So that being said, one of our good long-standing businesses, the Alibi Saloon, had a band that was scheduled to play. Obviously, they can't play indoors. So at first, the three people that we talked about exercising the right to okaying additional spaces was the former mayor, Mr. Welch, and myself. With the Honorable Mr. Goodman resigning, that became Mr. Welch, myself, and I included Ron because it is a downtown business and he is the fellow alderman for that place. So to make this short, we originally okayed for Cindy to use 3 additional parking spaces for Friday night for a band downtown, and she was okay with that. But after consideration and the band came and looked, they thought it would almost be impossible to try to get them in there. So she had previously asked for a request. So that's what I'm bringing forth tonight, hoping with a head nod and we can vote on it next week. She would like to block off from the alley where she's at to the intersection of Kickapoo and Pulaski Street from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock to have enough room for the band. She will enlarge her fenced-in area for the alcohol, so the alcohol will stay in the fenced-in area. And she will take down the barricades and such. She did ask, I stopped her at 5 a.m. this morning on the street as she was pulling up to work. So kudos to her for going to work early like I do. And if the city doesn't have any additional barricades, which we've handed them out to other businesses, so Walt might be a little shy, she has a business that has a few that she could use, but the city ones obviously are much bigger and would help block that off. So with that being said, I'm asking for some kind of agreeance that we approve this tonight so she can have the band Friday night, and we would just officially vote on it next week.
Mr. Hoblet.
Well, there's no really way to approve anything at this juncture for a vote. It would most likely have to be set on the vote and just kind of look the other way, I suppose. I mean, there's nothing we could really approve at this juncture.
Alderman Hoynicke.
Prior history, the mayor has just approved events similar to this before, and then yes, it has been placed on the agenda afterwards. Most of the time, it was because of a late notification or something. So,
So the mayor would take action and then put on the vote, and if the council has an issue for however the mayor acted, then they can suppose take it up at that point. Yes.
Yes, I guess so.
I guess so. Okay.
Alderman Parrott.
Would the city be liable for any thing that would happen on the street, given that the council didn't vote on it? Or would it be okay with the mayor approving?
With the mayor approving, let's just say for argument purposes, because we're kind of getting into a nebulous aspect of law with a lot of what-if scenarios. But let's say with the mayor approving, something would have happened. One can make an argument that only the mayor is liable at that point. But let's say the council were going to vote yes. Something happens over the course of the weekend. Was the council is all of a sudden going to pull away and say no because something happened at this point, and they want to just let the mayor just be out on their own at that point? I mean, it's a little, like I said, it's a kind of a nebulous aspect. It's kind of like playing hot potato with liability.
Well, and the reason I'm concerned is just not having city barricades. I don't know what this business would look like. The business that the owner is going to get these barricades from, are they appropriate for closure of streets or whatever? And if they are, okay. If they're,
they're from a construction company that does street work, so they have similar kind of barricades, but they just don't have them great big aluminum ones that we would use because we have passed them out to block off parking spots. They would be construction IDOT approved barricades.
I was thinking, if they're like hurdles or something from a track. I'm like, no, it's not going to work.
So we've done this before, and quite honestly, it's just a timing issue in that we thought that we were going to be able to utilize parking spots, as Kevin had mentioned. Unfortunately, not going to be able to, and now we don't have enough time to run it through the proper process. So I can say that I don't have any concern authorizing this, with the understanding that they would have to come in and fill out the sheet for the block party request or the road closure and an proof of insurance.
We've got the insurance from her liquor and the stuff she's got going on now.
Sounds like we're golden then. But we'll place that on the agenda for next week to formally approve it. Walt, do you have something?
Yeah, barricades shouldn't be an issue. We should be able to supply that without any problem.
So can you get with her Friday morning, Walt, and even if you have to set them on the side, and she'll spread them out?
Yeah, we'll deliver them. We would deliver them Friday morning, and then she would be responsible for putting them up.
What is the time on that request, Kevin?
7 to 11.
And Chief, can you have an officer swing by around 11 and make sure it's open back up, please? Sure. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Bateman?
So my second one comes from a citizen, and it's actually a legitimate thing. With the death of printed newspaper, when the city puts property out for bid, we put it in the Courier. That's the way it's been done forever, and we don't. Let's just face it. A lot of people don't take the Courier anymore, or any printed newspaper for that matter. So the request is either an additional way that citizens can check frequently on properties that the city has for sale or bids, or in driving up here tonight, and maybe it's already done or has a tab and we don't utilize it. Can we add a tab to the city website as properties for bid or sale, and they could check the city website daily, and it would be a list, same as what's in the Courier, of list of properties, descriptions, purpose for selling, or however we do it, and then they could click on that and then make the appropriate bid to the clerk's office, no different than what they would in the Courier. Actually, I think I like that idea better than trying to stick it in some of the electronic newspapers, because then it's up to them to just click on the city website and see what properties are up for bid and sale.
So are we required by law to put it in a print paper?
Yes.
Okay, so this would be in addition to that. Chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our site has functionality that they could even subscribe to a feed when articles are created in certain sections of the website. So they wouldn't have to go out there every day. They would receive notifications if a new bid got put out there. Correct?
So that's my question from the citizen. Is this something that can be done so that we still follow the law and put it in our one and only print newspaper? And it would give the many people who don't take the print newspaper an opportunity to look at the bids and bid. I think it opens up more possibilities for more people to bid, the higher the bids are usually. So
Say we do it. Any objections to that? Okay.
Yeah, actually, under our services tab, we already have a request for proposal quote bid in there. So all we have to do is feed it underneath there. So anytime we have something new. In fact, we still have the old police patrol vehicles RFP in there.
So it would be under which tab?
Services.
Services tab. We would have a section for properties.
Yeah,
bid.
request for proposals, quotes, and bids. Yep.
Okay, so we can maybe make that an official announcement on our Facebook page or whatever, that we're adding that feature to the city website, so that individuals that would like to bid on properties can do so without chasing it down in the printed paper.
We can do that. Okay. Any other announcements? Alderman Keller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a census response update. Nationally, 61% response rate. State is 66%. Lincoln and Logan County still remain above the state and national average at about 67%. Mount Pulaski actually is 74%, which exceeds the 2010 response rate. So that's even before the enumerators have had a chance to even go out. So go Mount Pulaski. The Census Bureau, I'll talk with Todd Volker today, who is the regional specialist for the Census Bureau for Central Illinois, had asked me to pass along a plea if there are any, now that things are beginning to open up, if there are events in which distribution of census materials might be appropriate, to let me know. And so we're happy to get some census materials to those individuals to pass out or to have available.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have anything else? Mr. Hoblet? Oh, you're talking about yeah, I'll get to that. I have a couple myself. The first thing is, unfortunately, everybody is starting to see events be canceled, and unfortunately, Third Fridays is no different. The committee we've been monitoring this, and we've had discussions about it, and the fact that we're just now going into phase 4, and that's only a gathering of up to 50 people, we don't feel that it would be responsible for us to jeopardize the safety of others and host those events. Not to mention the fact that one of the main components of that event for the children is the bouncy houses and things that we provide, and there's no way to do that in a sanitary manner that would be safe. So we're going to cancel all events this year. However, we have to book those bands in advance, months in advance, to get on their books. And as with all entertainment, we have a contract with them that states that if we cancel, we still have to pay. So the Third Friday Committee, and Alderman Bateman and Miss Bateman back there, city clerk, they're on that committee. they can also weigh in on if they'd like. But the idea is that we would reach out to the two bands that have been booked. One of them is Dan Tackett, and the other one is Harmony Grits, and ask them if they would still perform on those evenings, but do so in a manner that could provide music to the downtown restaurants and establishments that have outdoor seating. So it would be some background music, live music for those individuals. Kevin, do you want to elaborate on that one?
Yeah, there just may be an impromptu hootenanny on the courthouse square one night on a Friday night for a set period of time. And we're just hope people come out and socialize, keep their respective distances, and enjoy some live music and some food and entertainment downtown. I love entertaining kids, my grandkids especially, but maybe this is an evening the adults can come out and just enjoy some music and a social event for at least one night, 2 months in a row in downtown Lincoln.
Yeah, so can you reach out to the county and verify that we can use that? Okay, thank you. Next item is, as I mentioned, the governor put out an update on the 22nd, which was Monday, that we are going into phase 4 starting on Friday. Phase 4, I've got the guideline overview document up. It addresses all industries, day camps, manufacturing, indoor, outdoor recreation, meetings and social events, museums, health and fitness, offices, theaters, and performing arts. Increases to restaurants and bars the opportunity, so now they can do indoor seating as well. Youth and rec sports, zoos, retail service counters, personal care. There's a number of items in here, and we'll post this out on the city Facebook page so that you can review this guideline document. The stipulations are a little bit different, but the gist of it is that the restaurants can now start to have people indoors using proper social distancing and masks and the things that we've become accustomed to. In that same breath, the department heads met today and agree that we can go ahead and open up City Hall on Monday, the 29th. And then we'll also open up the Streets and Alley Safety Building out there on Limit Street as well. They'll have some safety precautions in place in both buildings to protect the people that are coming into the building. So unless there's an objection from a council member, we plan on opening up on the 29th. Okay. Last item I have, as everybody knows, the council voted to appoint me as acting mayor last week, which leaves one remaining point of business, and that is the Ward 1 seat that I currently hold. I've thought about this. I've talked to the city attorney about this. We've reviewed state statutes and past mayors who have been in this situation. And at this time, I'm going to continue to hold my seat in Ward 1 for a couple of reasons. The first one is the acting mayor role is a temporary role. I'm simply filling out the remainder of Mayor Goodman's term. And second of all, I have 3 years left on my term, and I'd like to continue to represent those individuals in Ward 1. I don't anticipate that that will be an issue. Continuing to provide the same level of attention to their details that Alderman Parrott and I have. If we reach that point, then we'll have another discussion. So I just want to make that clear that I will not be vacating my seat at this time. And the last item of business is that I would make a motion that we go into executive session under 2C5, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired. Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call. Alderman Keller, second. I made the motion.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Haneke?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Leith?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Parrott?
Yes.
Mr. Downs?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure, there may be one item of business afterwards, depending on how the conversation goes. So I just want to let everybody know. Beth, I'm gonna put you on mute.